The tomato sliced cleanly beneath Amira's knife, its flesh yielding in perfect symmetry. Friday night ritual homemade pasta sauce from her mother's recipe, a glass of Cabernet, perhaps a movie later. Her phone buzzed against the marble countertop, lighting up with a notification from the neighborhood WhatsApp group. Probably another alert about a suspicious van or a lost dog. She glanced down casually, knife poised mid-air. The world stopped. A photograph shimmering under the filter of 1,000 celebrations filled her screen. A wedding dress, pale ivory and soft as a whisper. The bride's smile, delicate, radiant. Layla, her daughter, her only child. Married. The knife clattered against the tiled floor. The sound barely registered as Amira stared at the image, hoping she was wrong, hoping it was a photo shoot, a prank, a cruel coincidence. But there she was. Layla wrapped in lace and love her arms entwined with a man Amira had only met twice. Around them, smiling guests, twinkling lights, a venue adorned with white roses and chandeliers. The caption cut deeper than any blade could, "Congrats to the newlyweds. What a perfect backyard wedding at their beautiful home. Yeah, just married, forever, begins where love wins." Their beautiful home. The home Amira had purchased for Layla 3 years ago. The home with the white picket fence and the rose garden Amira had planted herself. The home where Amira's name still stood on the deed. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through more photos, each one a fresh wound. Layla laughing with guests Amira had never met. Layla dancing with a tall, silver-haired man who must be her new father-in-law. Layla cutting a 4-tier cake, Nathan's hand covering hers on the knife. None of the faces in the crowd belonged to Amira. She hadn't been invited. She hadn't even known. The trembling moved from her hands to her chest, a quake that threatened to collapse her ribcage. When you raise a child alone, you think you're building an unshakable bond. She gave everything to Layla. Every meal she skipped so Layla could eat better. Every bill she paid late to buy those dance lessons. Every smile she wore when she was falling apart inside. Amira moved to her living room in a daze, sinking into the armchair that had witnessed 29 years of bedtime stories, homework struggles, teenage tears, and college applications. The walls around her were testament to a life dedicated to motherhood. Framed photos of Layla's milestones arranged in perfect chronological order. Layla's first day of kindergarten, gap-toothed and beaming. Layla's high school graduation, serious and proud. Layla's college acceptance letter, framed like the treasure it was. They were close once. Amira remembered when Layla used to crawl into her bed during thunderstorms. "You're my favorite person, Mama," she'd whisper, small fingers clutching Amira's nightgown. Amira held those memories like pearls in her chest. She thought they'd always be enough. But life peels your illusions away layer by painful layer. In recent years, there had been distance growing between them. Nothing explosive, no arguments, just a subtle growing quiet. Texts turned shorter, calls less frequent. Amira blamed it on work, on Layla's growing independence, on her relationship with Nathan. Maybe she hadn't pushed. She never wanted to be the kind of mother who held her child back. She didn't realize she had already been left behind. Amira's hands moved mechanically, opening Instagram, Facebook, every social platform where traces of her daughter's life might be found. It was all there. A full wedding journey documented for the world to see. Dress fittings with Nathan's mother, a smiling woman with highlighted hair and designer clothes. A bachelorette trip to Greece, Layla sun-kissed and laughing on a yacht with friends. Rehearsal dinners, vows under golden lanterns, dozens of smiling faces, all tagged, all celebrating. Except one. Not a single photo mentioned Amira. She wasn't just excluded. She was erased. A comment under one of the wedding photos caught her eye. "Perfect wedding. No drama, no family tension." Layla's reply stabbed through Amira's heart. Exactly no complications, just bright futures ahead. Drama. Complications. Was that what she had become to her daughter? An inconvenience to be managed, a complication to be avoided. Amira stood at her window, looking out at her small garden where roses now bloomed in the evening light. Memories flooded back. Layla at 7 giggling as Amira taught her to bake cookies. Layla at 16 crying in Amira's arms after her first heartbreak. Layla at 22 graduating college, hugging Amira tight and whispering, "I couldn't have done this without you, Mom." After her husband left when Layla was 10, Amira had worked 2 jobs, interior design during the day and weekend shifts at a flower shop, to ensure Layla never felt lacking. She'd missed dates promotions, even a marriage proposal from a kind man, because she feared remarrying would disrupt Layla's life. "You used to call me your favorite person." Amira whispered to the empty room, touching Layla's graduation photo on the side table. I held those memories like jewels in my chest. 3 days passed. Amira moved through them like a ghost, replaying every interaction with Layla over the past year, searching for the moment when she became disposable. Was it when Nathan entered the picture, the handsome financial analyst with the perfect smile and the family connections that Amira, a self-employed interior designer who had worked her way up from nothing, could never provide? Or had the seeds been planted earlier? Had Amira loved too much, given too freely, making Layla see her as suffocating rather than supporting? On the 3rd day, Amira's phone rang. Her heart leapt, hoping it was Layla, but Thomas's name flashed on the screen instead. Her oldest friend, a freelance journalist who had stood by her through divorce, single motherhood, and every crisis in between. Have you seen the photos? His voice carried the gentle caution of someone delivering bad news to a person already wounded. I just saw them on Facebook. Layla's wedding. Yes. The word came out flat, emotionless. I saw. My God, Amira, how could she not invite you? Outrage colored his tone, the kind only a true friend could summon. After everything you've done for her, I don't know. And that was the truth that haunted her. She didn't know. She had no explanation for why her only child would cut her out of the most important day of her life. Thomas arrived an hour later with a bottle of wine and a shoulder to lean on. They sat in her kitchen, the tomatoes now dried and forgotten on the cutting board. I still can't believe it, he repeated, shaking his head. The nerve of that girl. I need to contact her, Amira said, reaching for her phone. I need to understand. Thomas placed his hand over hers, stopping her. What will you say? Will you yell, cry, beg for explanations? Think carefully, Amira. The first move sets the tone. He was right. Impulsive reactions born from pain rarely led to resolution. After careful consideration, Amira composed a simple text. I saw your wedding photos. Congratulations. I hope you're happy. 10 words. No accusations, no questions, no visible heartbreak. Just acknowledgement and a mother's eternal wish for her child's happiness, even when that happiness excluded her. A week passed without response. Amira checked her phone, obsessively jumping at every notification, but Layla's name never appeared. The silence was another kind of cruelty, not even worth an explanation. Finally, on the 8th day, a text appeared. I didn't want drama. I thought it was better this way. No apology. No explanation beyond that single cutting word drama. Her presence at her own daughter's wedding would have been drama. The woman who had given life to Layla, who had kissed scraped knees and checked for monsters under the bed, who had worked herself to exhaustion to provide opportunities. That woman was reduced to an unwanted complication. Thomas visited again, bringing takeout when he realized Amira hadn't been eating. As they picked at the food, he mentioned something that made her sit up straight. I heard Layla and Nathan hosted quite the dinner party last weekend. At their house. Well, your house, technically. What do you mean? The house you bought for Layla. You know, Nathan was telling everyone how they'd been renovating it. Taking credit for the garden you planted, if you can believe it. Thomas paused, noticing Amira's expression. Wait, you do still own that house, right? Layla never completed the transfer of the deed like you mentioned she should. That's right, Amira said slowly, realization dawning. My name is still on the papers. I wanted her to feel secure when she was younger. I helped pay half the mortgage for the first 2 years. Thomas looked directly into her eyes. So they held their wedding there, at your house, and didn't invite you. They're using your property to host their new family while shutting you out of their lives. Something shifted inside Amira in that moment. Not grief or anger, but a cold clarity. She walked to her office and pulled out the filing cabinet drawer, retrieving the folder containing the house deed. There it was, her name on the legal document. Owner Amira Cadier. What are you thinking? Thomas asked, recognizing the determined look that had appeared in her friend's eyes. I'm going to sell it, Amira said, her voice steady and certain. If she doesn't want me as part of her life, then she doesn't need what belongs to me. Are you sure this is a big step? I've never been more sure of anything, Amira replied, straightening her shoulders. It's time I did something for myself. The next morning, Amira contacted a real estate agent, a professional woman who raised an eyebrow at Amira's request for a quick, discreet sale but asked no questions. The house went on the market on a Saturday morning when Amira knew Layla and Nathan would be honeymooning in the Maldives, a fact she'd gleaned from their public social media posts. Should you tell Layla? Thomas asked as they reviewed the listing. No, Amira replied decisively. She didn't inform me about her wedding. I don't owe her an explanation for this. The housing market was hot, and the house with its white picket fence and rose garden attracted multiple offers within days. Amira selected a young couple expecting their first child who offered 15% above asking price and wrote a heartfelt letter about wanting to raise their family in such a beautiful home. As she signed the papers finalizing the sale, Amira felt a strange peace settle over her. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. Taking back control of her life after decades of putting herself second. She hired a professional moving company to carefully pack all of Layla's belongings still in the house. She paid for 6 months at an upscale storage facility and placed the key and receipt in an unmarked beige envelope in Layla's work mailbox. No note, no explanation. "Aren't you worried about how Layla will react?" Thomas asked when they celebrated the sale over dinner at an upscale restaurant, a luxury Amira rarely allowed herself before. "I've spent my entire life worrying about her reactions," Amira replied, sipping expensive wine. "It's time I thought about myself for once." With the proceeds from the house sale, Amira made a decision that set her heart racing with excitement for the first time in years. She would go to Paris. Not just for a week or two, but for 3 full months. She'd dreamed of living in the City of Light since she was a girl long before Layla was born. She'd postponed that dream to raise her daughter to provide stability and opportunities. Paris in the spring. Amira smiled at Thomas as they browsed apartment rentals online. "I've dreamed about this since I was a young woman before Layla was even born." "You deserve it," Thomas said, raising his glass in a toast. "It's time Amira Kadir lived for herself." The day after finalizing the house sale, Amira received her plane tickets to Paris. She felt a bittersweet joy. The end of one chapter, the beginning of another. She enrolled in French language classes, bought travel guides, and planned her days in the city she'd only visited in dreams. A week after the sale was completed, Amira's phone began lighting up with calls and messages from Layla, all unanswered. Amira chose silence as a conscious tool. Not silence born of hurt or inability to speak, but silence as strength. Then one evening her doorbell rang. Layla stood there, face flushed with anger, hands clenched into pale fists. "How could you do this?" she demanded the moment Amira opened the door. "You sold my house without any warning. All my things are gone." Amira let her daughter in remarkably calm. "It was my house," she said simply. "My name on the deed." "But you said it was my house. You said you bought it for me." "I bought it for you to start your new life," Amira replied. "I thought I would be part of that life." The argument erupted in Amira's tasteful living room. Layla accused her mother of being controlling, of always invading her space. Amira countered that she had only tried to support to help as any mother would. "You didn't invite me to your wedding," Amira finally said, her voice trembling slightly. "You held the most important day of your life in a house I bought for you, and you didn't even tell me it was happening." Layla fell silent for a moment, clearly unprepared for this directness. "I didn't want drama," she finally said, staring at the rim of the untouched tea Amira had made. "You always make everything more complicated than it needs to be." "Drama?" Amira repeated, astonished. "Inviting your mother to your wedding is drama. Or was it Nathan who didn't want me there because I don't fit the perfect image he wants to build?" The surprise in Layla's eyes confirmed Amira had hit on the truth. "Nathan thinks you're too traditional," Layla admitted, unable to meet her mother's gaze. "He's trying to move up in his company and wanted to impress his boss and clients. He said the wedding needed a certain aesthetic, and you wouldn't blend." "And you agreed with him?" Amira asked, her voice calm to the point of being unsettling. "I love him," Layla replied, as if that explained everything. "I didn't want to disappoint him. He said this was our chance to cut the cord to start our new life without interference." Amira studied her daughter, no longer the little girl who'd cling to her during storms, but a woman who had chosen to erase her mother from the most significant moment of her life for the sake of appearances. "I'm going to Paris," Amira said, her voice steady. "I've dreamed of this my entire life since before you were born. I postponed it to raise you to give you the best life I could. Now it's time for me to live for myself." "Will you come back?" Layla asked, her voice small like a child's. "I don't know," Amira answered honestly. "I need time to find myself again. You chose a life without me in it. Now I need to discover what a life without you looks like." Layla left in tears, but Amira felt no victory, no revenge. Only a strange tranquility, as if a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. When the door closed, she returned to the kitchen and made a cup of lavender tea. For the first time in many days, she felt like she could breathe again. Amira placed her phone on silent, knowing Layla would call again. But this time she wouldn't rush to answer. Silence wasn't absence. Silence was choice. Silence was strength wrapped in satin. A week later, Amira boarded a first-class flight to Paris, another luxury she'd never permitted herself before. As the plane touched down, she felt her heart lighten for the first time in months. She rented a charming apartment in Montmartre, enrolled in French cooking classes, and spent hours at the Louvre. One afternoon, while sketching at a riverside cafe, she met Daniel, an American art professor on sabbatical, writing a book in Paris. He was a gentleman with a warm smile and wise eyes. They began talking about art, about books, about life. "I feel like I'm starting over," Amira confessed as they walked along the Seine. "Sometimes that's the best thing that can happen," Daniel replied. "A new beginning." As they strolled beneath the plane trees lining the river, Amira realized she was smiling, truly smiling, for the first time since seeing that wedding photo. Paris stretched before her full of possibilities she had never allowed herself to imagine. For decades, she had been Layla's mother first, and Amira second. Now she was discovering who Amira could be when she placed herself first. The pain wasn't gone. It might never fully disappear, but alongside it grew something new, the tender shoots of self-discovery, of independence, of joy that belonged to her alone. That evening back in her apartment, Amira received another text from Layla. "Mom, please answer my calls. We need to talk about the house." Amira looked at the message for a long time, before she would have dropped everything to respond to smooth things over to make Layla's world easier. But Paris glittered outside her window, and for once she chose herself. She set the phone aside, picked up her sketchbook, and began to draw the view from her window. Not as it was, but as she saw it through newly awakened eyes. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Thomas checking in. "How's Paris treating you?" "I'm learning to breathe again," Amira replied. "I'm learning that the world doesn't end when you stop holding it up." She thought about Layla, about the hurt and confusion her daughter must be feeling. Part of her ached to make it better as she always had. But another part, the part growing stronger with each Parisian sunrise, recognized that some lessons could only be learned through consequence. As twilight descended over the city, Amira sat by her window with a glass of wine. For the first time in her adult life, she had no responsibilities to anyone but herself. No school lunches to prepare, no emotional crises to navigate, no one else's dreams to prioritize above her own. The freedom was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She picked up her phone and opened Instagram, scrolling until she found Layla's profile. Her daughter had posted earlier that day, not about the house or her mother's absence, but a carefully filtered photo of herself and Nathan at an upscale restaurant, #blessed. Amira closed the app and looked out at the Parisian rooftops bathed in purple dusk. She had given Layla everything, her time, her energy, her heart. She had taught her daughter how to walk, how to read, how to dream. But perhaps the final most important lesson was this one, that love without respect was incomplete, that relationships required reciprocity, that even mothers had the right to their own lives. Tomorrow she would visit the Musée d'Orsay. The day after, perhaps the gardens at Versailles. She would sit in cafes and sketch strangers, taste wines she couldn't pronounce, learn enough French to order her own meals without apologizing. She would reacquaint herself with the woman she had set aside for 29 years, the woman with dreams beyond motherhood, with talents yet unexplored, with a heart capable of healing itself. As night fell over Paris, Amira opened her journal and wrote words she had never allowed herself to think before. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't hurting those who hurt you. It's learning to live a beautiful life without them. Revenge isn't rage and fire and broken glass. Revenge is silence. Revenge is peace. Revenge is moving forward while they still look back. Revenge is loving yourself more than they ever thought you could. She closed the journal, set down her pen, and for the first time since that fateful Friday night, when her world collapsed, Amira Carrière slept without dreams of her daughter. Paris mornings arrived with honey-gold light that spilled through Amira's apartment windows, so different from the hurried sunrises she'd barely noticed back home. 3 weeks had passed since she'd left America behind. 3 weeks of museums and sidewalk cafes, of stumbling through French phrases and sketching river scenes that grew more confident with each attempt. 3 weeks of not being someone's mother first. The boulangerie downstairs filled the air with the scent of baking bread, a daily ritual that marked time in a city where minutes stretched luxuriously rather than racing by. Amira stood at her small balcony coffee cup, warming her palms, watching Parisians navigate their morning commutes. Their purposeful movements reminded her she no longer needed purpose beyond simply existing. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, the third call from Layla this week. Each time, Amira let it go to voicemail. Each time, the messages grew more desperate. "Mom, please call me back. I need to talk about where all my things went." Then, "Mom, this isn't fair. You can't just disappear like this." And yesterday, "Nathan is furious about the house. His parents were supposed to visit next month. We need to figure this out." Need. A word Layla had wielded her entire life, and Amira had always rushed to fulfill whatever followed it. But now, standing amidst the morning light of a city she'd dreamed of for decades, Amira realized the only need that mattered was her own. She silenced the phone and slipped it into a drawer. The galleries of the Louvre awaited, and she'd promised herself complete immersion in Vermeer's exhibition. The museum's grand halls hummed with hushed conversations in a dozen languages. Amira moved slowly through the crowds, lingering before each painting, absorbing details she'd only seen in books. The reverent quiet felt sacred after years of constant availability. To clients, to Layla, to everyone except herself. Before a luminous portrait of a girl with a pearl earring, Amira sensed someone standing beside her. Daniel, the art professor she'd met at the cafe, smiled in gentle recognition. You see how he captured the light reflecting off her skin? That's the magic, making something permanent from something as fleeting as a glance. They moved through the exhibition together, their conversation flowing between art theory and personal observation. At the museum cafe over espresso and tarte tatin, Daniel spoke of his sabbatical year, his book on light and Renaissance, painting his life teaching at a small New England college. And you, what brings a talented interior designer from Virginia to Paris alone? His question carried no judgment, only genuine curiosity. For the first time, Amira told her story to someone who knew nothing of her past, not as a rushed explanation between Layla's activities or client meetings, but as the centerpiece of conversation. She spoke of her early design ambitions, her marriage at 23, Layla's birth a year later, her husband's departure when their daughter was 10. She described building her business while raising Layla alone the house she'd purchased for her daughter, the wedding to which she wasn't invited. "And then I sold the house," she concluded, surprised by how clinical she now sounded about an action that had required such courage weeks earlier. "I bought this ticket to Paris and left." Daniel considered her over the rim of his coffee cup. Not many people have the strength to redraw the boundaries of their lives that completely, especially mothers. "I'm not sure it was strength," Amira admitted, tracing the edge of her saucer with her fingertip. "Maybe just self-preservation." "Self-preservation is strength," Daniel replied, "especially when you've spent decades preserving everyone but yourself." They parted with plans to visit Musée d'Orsay together the following afternoon. Walking back to her apartment, Amira realized she hadn't thought about Layla for nearly 3 hours, the longest such stretch since arriving in Paris. The guilt that reflexively followed this realization surprised her. Was it still maternal neglect when your child was 30 and had explicitly cut you from their life? Her apartment felt different when she returned, somehow more her own, as if each day she spent claiming her independence altered the physical space around her. She opened her sketchbook and began drawing from memory the curve of light on the pearl earring, the hushed museum corridor, the way Daniel's eyes crinkled when he laughed. Her phone buzzed again from its drawer. This time it wasn't Layla, but Thomas. She answered his familiar voice, bridging the Atlantic with comforting ease. "The prodigal friend calls at last. How's the city of light treating my favorite runaway?" "It's everything I imagined," Amira replied, settling onto her sofa. "More, actually. I'm taking a painting class tomorrow. Can you believe that I haven't painted since college? I always told you that you were in the wrong field. Interior design might pay the bills, but your soul belongs to a canvas." They talked easily, Thomas filling her in on neighborhood gossip until his tone shifted, becoming more careful. "I ran into Zara yesterday, Layla's friend from high school. She asked about you, seemed concerned." Amira tensed. What did she want? She wouldn't say much, but she hinted things aren't great between Layla and Nathan. Something about money problems he didn't disclose before the wedding. "That's not my concern anymore," Amira said, though a tug of maternal worry contradicted her words. I know. I'm just the messenger. Oh, and apparently Nathan's been telling everyone you had a mental breakdown, and that's why you sold the house and fled the country." Anger flashed through her, hot, immediate. "That's absurd. I made a perfectly rational decision to reclaim my property and take a trip I've planned for decades. You and I know that. But his version plays better at cocktail parties, I suppose. Makes him the long-suffering son-in-law rather than the man who excluded his mother-in-law from the wedding." After hanging up, Amira paced her apartment, the peaceful mood of her museum day shattered. Mental breakdown. The word stabbed at her self-confidence. Was it crazy to sell a house you legally owned? Was it unstable to finally pursue a lifelong dream, or was the real insanity staying in place while others rewrote your role in their narrative? She opened her laptop and, against her better judgment, searched for Layla's Instagram profile. Her daughter had been posting prolifically photos of her and Nathan at upscale restaurants, carefully framed images of their temporary rental apartment, close-ups of expensive purchases. The caption spoke of new beginnings and unexpected changes, but never mentioned what had actually happened. One post caught her eye. Layla standing beside Nathan's mother at some charity event with the caption, "So blessed to have this amazing woman in my life. The mother I always needed. #best mile ever." The knife twisted deeper. Amira closed the laptop, hands shaking. She'd expected anger from Layla, perhaps eventual understanding, but not this public replacement, this erasure of her existence. The painting class the next morning became her sanctuary. For 3 hours, she focused solely on transferring the image in her mind to canvas, a memory of her grandmother's garden in Virginia, vibrant with summer blooms. The instructor moved among the students, pausing behind Amira with an approving murmur. "You've painted before. There's confidence in your brushstrokes." "A lifetime ago," Amira replied, realizing the truth of it. She had abandoned this passion when responsibility called. First marriage, then motherhood, then survival after divorce. Always something more important than her own creative expression. Daniel waited outside when class ended, his presence already familiar, though they'd met just twice before. They spent the afternoon at Musée d'Orsay, lost in impressionist colors and conversations that ranged from art history to childhood memories. When evening approached, he invited her to dinner at a small bistro in Le Marais. Under the warm glow of vintage light fixtures over plates of coq au vin and a bottle of Burgundy, Amira felt something long dormant awakening. Not just attraction, though Daniel's intelligent eyes and quiet confidence certainly appealed, but the sensation of being seen, truly seen, as herself, not as an extension of someone else's needs. "Tell me about your paintings," Daniel said, refilling her wine glass. "Thomas mentioned you were talented but chose design for practicality." Amira tilted her head, surprised. "You've spoken with Thomas? He called me yesterday. I think he wanted to make sure I wasn't an international art thief or something." Daniel's smile carried no offense. "He's protective of you. That's rare, having a friend who guards your well-being from 4,000 miles away." "Thomas has been there through everything," Amira acknowledged, wondering what else they'd discussed. "He's the only person besides Layla who knows all my chapters." Daniel's hand found hers across the table, a gentle pressure that asked nothing. "I'd like to know your chapters too, if you're willing to share them." The evening stretched into night, their conversation flowing effortlessly until the bistro staff began stacking chairs around them. Walking her home, Daniel kept a respectful distance that nonetheless held promise. At her apartment door, he kissed her cheek and asked if she'd join him for a concert at Sainte-Chapelle on Saturday. Alone in her apartment, Amira touched her cheek where his lips had brushed her skin. At 57, she hadn't expected to feel this adolescent flutter, this possibility. Her marriage had ended so long ago, and the years of single motherhood had left little space for romance. The few relationships she'd attempted had fizzled quickly, incompatible with her dedication to Layla. But now, with only herself to consider what might be possible, she checked her phone before bed. 3 missed calls from Layla and a text from Thomas. "Zara reached out again. Says she needs to talk to you about Layla. Important. Call me." Amira hesitated, torn between the clean break she'd been cultivating and the persistent tug of maternal concern. She compromised by texting Thomas that she'd call tomorrow, then silenced her phone again. Sleep came slowly, images of the day, paintbrushes and canvas Monet's water lilies, Daniel's smile across a candlelit table, mixing with unbidden worries about Layla. Whatever her daughter had done, however deeply the exclusion from the wedding had wounded her, some primal part of Amira couldn't fully disconnect from Layla's well-being. Morning arrived with rain pattering against her windows, the kind of gentle Parisian shower that seemed designed for museums and bookshops rather than outdoor excursions. Amira called Thomas while making coffee, bracing herself for whatever information awaited. "Finally, I was beginning to think you'd thrown your phone into the Seine." Thomas's voice carried both relief and tension. "Zara came by my place yesterday. She's worried about Layla." "What happened?" Despite her resolutions, concern flooded Amira's system. "Apparently Nathan has some serious debt problems he kept hidden until after the wedding. Credit cards, gambling, the works. Now he's pressuring Layla to use her savings to cover his mess." "That's terrible, but there's more." Zara says he's become controlling, monitoring Layla's calls, checking her texts, isolating her from friends who might question their picture-perfect social media life. Classic early warning signs. The coffee pot overflowed hot liquid spilling across the counter as Amira froze. Has he hurt her? Not physically from what Zara knows, but emotionally he's a master manipulator. You know how Layla's always needed validation. He gives it then withdraws it to keep her desperate for approval. Familiar maternal protection surged through Amira. She wanted to book the next flight home to confront Nathan to rescue her daughter. But another voice, newer, stronger, reminded her of the wedding photos of drama and complications of being erased from Layla's narrative. What does Zara want me to do? Layla made her choice very clear. She doesn't want me in her life. She wants you to call Layla. She thinks your daughter needs an escape route, even if she doesn't know it yet. After hanging up, Amira stood at her rain-streaked window, watching Parisians navigate puddles with cheerful resignation. The city continued its rhythms regardless of her personal turmoil, a reminder that her drama, however consuming, was but a single thread in the vast tapestry of human experience. She had come to Paris to find herself to heal from Layla's rejection, to build a life centered on her own needs rather than her daughter's. Making that call would risk entangling herself again in the very relationship that had wounded her so deeply. Yet what kind of mother, what kind of person would she be if she ignored a warning that her child might be in an unhealthy situation? The painting class beckoned, offering structure and escape. Amira gathered her supplies and headed out, postponing her decision. For 3 hours, she lost herself in color and form, creating a landscape that the instructor praised as emotionally resonant. The creative flow provided temporary sanctuary from her churning thoughts. Daniel met her afterward, his smile warming her despite the persistent rain. They ducked into Shakespeare and Company, browsing the crowded shelves of the famous bookstore while sharing an umbrella. In the poetry section, his hand found the small of her back, a touch so natural it seemed they'd known each other for years rather than days. Over late lunch, she told him about Thomas's call and her dilemma. Daniel listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. "What would you do?" she asked, finally pushing her half-eaten croque-monsieur aside. "If your son had cut you out of his life, then possibly needed help." Daniel considered running a finger around the rim of his water glass. "I think we never fully stop being parents, regardless of our children's ages or actions. The nature of the relationship changes, but the core remains. So I should call her after everything." "I didn't say that." His eyes met hers directly. "There's a difference between abandoning someone and establishing healthy boundaries. You haven't abandoned Layla. You've simply stopped allowing her to treat you as an afterthought. But if she's in trouble, then she has your number," he said gently. "Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is wait for people to recognize they need us rather than rushing in to fix problems they don't acknowledge." That evening, alone in her apartment, Amira weighed her options. She opened her journal writing to clarify her thoughts. Am I avoiding calling Layla out of hurt pride or genuine self-protection? Is this boundary setting or punishment? What do I really want from our relationship now? The questions had no easy answers. She thought of all the times she'd dropped everything for Layla's emergencies, real and perceived. The graduation dress that needed overnight alterations, the breakup that required midnight ice cream and consolation, the job interview preparation that consumed an entire weekend. Always, Amira had prioritized her daughter's needs above her own plans, her own rest, her own desires. And what had that pattern created? A daughter who saw her mother as a service provider rather than a person with her own life and feelings. Amira made her decision. She wouldn't call Layla directly. That would simply reinforce the dynamic she was trying to change. Instead, she texted Zara, "I've heard you're concerned about Layla. I'm in Paris right now, but would like to understand what's happening. Can we talk tomorrow?" The response came almost immediately. "Yes, please. Been trying to reach you through Thomas. Can call you at 9 a.m. your time." With that arranged, Amira felt a weight lift. She was neither rushing to rescue nor completely detaching. She was gathering information before deciding her next steps. This measured response honored both her maternal instincts and her newfound commitment to herself. She slept better that night and awoke prepared for her conversation with Zara. The young woman had been Layla's friend since high school, a steadier presence than most of her daughter's rotating social circle. If Zara was concerned enough to reach out to Thomas, the situation merited attention. At precisely 9, her phone rang. Zara's voice sounded tired, stressed. "Mrs. Kadir, thank you for calling back. I wasn't sure you would after everything. Tell me what's happening with Layla." Amira kept her tone neutral, professional. "It started after you sold the house. Nathan was furious. He'd been telling his family and colleagues that they owned this amazing property. Then suddenly they had to move to this cramped apartment and all his big plans fell apart. Plans that involved a house he didn't own. Amira noted, unable to keep the edge from her voice. I know, but instead of admitting that to his friends, he blamed you. Said you had psychological problems, that Layla had been trying to get you help for years. The familiar anger flared again. And Layla allowed this narrative. That's the thing. She started defending him, repeating his version to everyone. It was like she got recruited into his reality. Then I found out about the debts. Zara explained that Nathan had accumulated nearly $90,000 in credit card debt and personal loans before the wedding, information he'd concealed from Layla. Now he was pressuring her to liquidate her savings, money Amira had gifted her daughter for a future home purchase, to clear his financial mess. Last week I stopped by their apartment unannounced. Layla looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days. When Nathan stepped out, she broke down, said she didn't know what to do. He's been monitoring her calls, reading her texts, telling her which friends she can see. Cold dread filled Amira's stomach. Has he threatened her? Physically, I mean. Not that she's told me. But she's scared of his anger. And he's isolated her from anyone who might question their relationship. Zara paused. Mrs. Kadir, I think she needs a way out, but she's too proud to ask for help after what happened with the wedding. After the call ended, Amira sat motionless, processing everything she'd learned. The situation sounded increasingly like the early stages of emotional abuse, something she recognized from her work with a women's shelter years earlier. The isolation, the financial control, the rewriting of reality, all classic warning signs. Her maternal instinct screamed to intervene immediately. The more measured voice of her new self urged caution. Rushing in might only push Layla further into Nathan's control, especially if she wasn't ready to acknowledge the unhealthy dynamics. Amira called Thomas, who confirmed he'd noticed similar concerning patterns. She's lost weight, he reported. And that Instagram perfection is pure performance. I ran into them at the grocery store last week. They were fighting in the parking lot. The moment they saw me, they switched to those plastic smiles. With Daniel's concert scheduled that evening, Amira tried to compartmentalize her worries. She selected a simple black dress and spent extra time on her makeup, determined to maintain the Parisian life she was building, despite the storm clouds gathering back home. The medieval stained glass of Sainte-Chapelle cast jeweled light across the ancient stone as a string quartet played Vivaldi. Seated beside Daniel in the magnificent space, Amira felt an almost painful beauty in the moment. The transcendent music, the centuries-old architecture, the presence of this man who saw her as complete in herself rather than as someone's mother. At dinner afterward, she shared Zara's revelations. Daniel listened with the same attentive focus he gave everything from Renaissance paintings to street performers. You're worried about her, he observed when she finished. Despite everything, she's still my daughter. The simple truth hung between them. But I don't know if I should contact her directly or wait for her to reach out. What would have helped you most when you were in an unhealthy relationship? His question cut through her circular thinking. When you were with Layla's father before the divorce, what did you need then? Amira considered memories surfacing of her marriage's painful final years. Space to think clearly without his influence. Someone who believed my perception of reality when he was trying to distort it. And a safety net, knowing I had options if I chose to leave. Then perhaps that's what you offer Layla, Daniel suggested. Not a dramatic rescue that might backfire, but a quiet, steady presence she can turn to when she's ready. That night in her apartment, Amira crafted a careful email to her daughter. Layla, I've been thinking about you. Whatever has happened between us, I want you to know that I'm here if you need me. No judgments, no I told you so. Just a safe place if and when you want it. Love, Mom. She hesitated before pressing send, wondering if Nathan monitored Layla's email as well. On instinct, she created a new email address, one Layla would recognize as her mother's, but Nathan might not, and sent the message from there. A small protective measure that might make a difference if the situation was as controlling as Zara described. The next morning, Amira received a response from an email address she didn't recognize. I can't talk now. He checks everything. Thank you for reaching out. I need time to think. L. The brevity and secrecy of the response confirmed Zara's concerns. Amira forwarded the exchange to Thomas, asking him to keep a closer eye on Layla without being obvious. She also researched domestic abuse resources in Virginia that might help when, if, her daughter decided to leave. Despite the storm brewing across the ocean, Amira committed to continuing her Parisian journey. She attended her painting classes, explored new neighborhoods, and spent increasingly delightful hours with Daniel. They visited galleries and concerts, cooked dinner in her small kitchen, and stayed up late discussing everything from politics to childhood memories. 3 days after their Sainte-Chapelle evening, he kissed her properly for the first time in the shadow of Notre Dame's reconstruction. His lips were gentle questioning rather than demanding, and Amira found herself responding with an intensity that surprised them both. At 57, she hadn't expected to feel this rush of desire, this awakening of possibilities. They moved slowly, both carrying the wisdom of past relationships and the caution they engendered. Daniel never pressed for more than Amira offered, seeming content with the gradual unfolding of their connection. "I leave Paris in 4 months," he reminded her one evening as they walked along the illuminated Seine. "Back to faculty meetings and undergraduate essays." "I know," she replied, her hand comfortable in his. "I have 2 months left here myself." Neither spoke the obvious question, what then? They existed in a Parisian bubble outside normal life's constraints and responsibilities. Whether their connection could survive translation back to American reality remained uncertain. A week passed without further word from Layla. Amira checked her secret email account obsessively, but found only promotional newsletters and spam. She called Thomas daily for updates, but he reported seeing Layla only once at a distance in the grocery store. "She looked tired," was all he could offer. The helplessness gnawed at Amira. For nearly 3 decades, she'd shaped her existence around protecting and supporting her daughter. Now, when Layla might truly need her, she was separated by an ocean and years of accumulated hurt. Daniel noticed her preoccupation during their visit to Musée Rodin. "You're thousands of miles away," he observed as they stood before the thinker. "Is it Layla? I feel like I abandoned her." Amira admitted the guilt she'd been suppressing finally surfacing. "What if something happens because I wasn't there?" "You didn't abandon her," Daniel corrected gently. "She excluded you from her life quite deliberately. You're respecting her choice while remaining available if she needs you. That's not abandonment, it's maturity. But if she's in trouble, she has your contact information. She has Thomas nearby. She has Zara watching out for her. You've created a safety net without smothering her." His eyes held hers steadily. Sometimes loving someone means giving them space to make their own decisions, even when those decisions might be mistakes. That evening, Amira received an unexpected call from Zara. "Mrs. Kadir, something happened. Layla and Nathan had a huge fight last night. He threw her phone against the wall when she got a text he couldn't read." Amira's heart raced. "Is she hurt?" "Not physically, but she's scared. She's staying with me tonight. Told Nathan she needed space to think. He's been calling nonstop, alternating between threats and apologies." "The classic cycle," Amira murmured, recognizing the pattern. "Has she said what she wants to do?" "She's confused. Part of her wants to believe his apologies, but I think she's starting to see the pattern." Zara hesitated. "She asked about you, wanted to know if you were still in Paris." Hope flickered in Amira's chest. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that you're there building a new chapter, but that you'd be there for her if she needed you." "I hope that was okay." "It was perfect," Amira assured her. "Will you give her a message? Tell her I have a friend who can help her access her own bank accounts without Nathan's knowledge if she needs that information." After hanging up, Amira paced her apartment, maternal anxiety warring with her commitment to respecting Layla's agency. She wanted to book the next flight home to wrap her arms around her daughter and shield her from harm. But she recognized that impulse as part of the dynamic that had enabled Layla's dependence and entitlement. Instead, she called her attorney back in Virginia, arranging for him to assist Layla with financial protection measures if needed. She texted Thomas, asking him to be available if Layla needed immediate help. She researched women's support services that could offer counseling and practical assistance. All the while, she maintained her Parisian life, painting classes, explorations with Daniel French language lessons. This careful balance represented her new reality, a mother who could offer support without surrendering her own existence. 3 days later, her secret email account pinged with a message from Layla. "I've been thinking a lot. About the wedding, the house, everything. I think I made some mistakes. Nathan isn't who I thought. Can we talk? Not now, but soon." The message contained no apology, no acknowledgement of the pain she'd caused. Yet Amira recognized it as a significant step, Layla reaching out rather than responding to her mother's initiatives. She crafted a careful reply. "I'm here when you're ready. Take whatever time you need to make decisions that feel right for you. My door is always open." That evening, she shared the development with Daniel over dinner at his apartment, a cozy 1-bedroom near the Pantheon filled with books and art prints. He'd cooked coq au vin, filling the space with savory aromas that reminded Amira of her grandmother's kitchen. "It's progress," he acknowledged, refilling their wine glasses. "But be careful about expectations. People in controlling relationships often cycle through leaving and returning several times before making a final break." "I know," Amira sighed. "I've seen it at the women's shelter where I volunteered. I just never imagined my daughter would be in this situation." "No one does," Daniel replied. "But she has advantages many women don't. Financial resources, education, friends like Zara, and a mother who'll support her without judgment." Later, as they settled on his sofa with dessert, Daniel broached the subject they'd been carefully avoiding. "I've been thinking about what happens when we both return to the States." Amira's heart quickened. "So have I. My sabbatical ends in August. I go back to teaching in Massachusetts." His hand found hers fingers intertwining. "Virginia isn't exactly next door, but it's not Paris to Virginia either." "What are you suggesting?" Amira asked, though she understood his direction. "That we don't treat this as a Parisian fling. That we see if what we're building here can translate to real life back home." His eyes held question's vulnerability. "Weekend visits, holiday breaks. It wouldn't be easy, but it might be worth trying," she finished for him, the possibility both thrilling and terrifying. After decades of putting her own desires last, the prospect of prioritizing a relationship that existed solely for her own happiness felt almost transgressive. In the weeks that followed, Amira's life developed dual focal points: her deepening connection with Daniel and the cautious reconnection with Layla. Her daughter sent occasional updates through the secret email account, reporting that she'd moved permanently to Zara's apartment and was considering filing for separation. Nathan oscillated between rage and desperate reconciliation attempts, once showing up at Zara's building at midnight, shouting until neighbors called police. The incident pushed Layla to file a temporary restraining order, a step Amira supported through carefully worded emails that offered encouragement without pressure. Thomas kept Amira informed of developments he observed personally, Nathan badmouthing Layla to mutual friends, changing the locks on their apartment, spreading rumors about mental health issues. Each report confirmed that Layla had made the right decision in leaving, though Amira knew her daughter likely still harbored doubts and conflicted feelings. Through it all, Amira maintained her Parisian routine: painting classes where her work received increasing praise, explorations of hidden neighborhoods with Daniel solo afternoons in museums and gardens. She developed friendships with other expatriates in her apartment building, joining them for weekly dinner parties where conversations flowed in a mixture of halting French and fluent English. As May bloomed into June, Paris transformed. Cafe tables spilled further onto sidewalks, parks filled with sunbathers and picnickers, and evening light stretched luxuriously until nearly 10 o'clock. Amira's paintings evolved as well, moving from tentative studies to confident expressions of her inner landscape. "You should consider showing these," her instructor suggested after class one day, lingering over a series of Seine landscapes Amira had created. "There's a small gallery in Le Marais that features emerging artists. I could make an introduction." The suggestion stunned her. "I'm hardly an emerging artist. I'm a 57-year-old interior designer who's just rediscovering an old hobby." "Age is irrelevant to art," he replied with a Gallic shrug. "And these aren't hobbyist works. There's authentic emotion here, a unique perspective. Consider it, yes." Amira mentioned the conversation to Daniel that evening as they prepared dinner in her kitchen, working in comfortable synchronicity. He paused, his vegetable-chopping eyes brightening. "You should absolutely do it. Your work deserves to be seen." "It seems presumptuous," she protested. "I've only been painting seriously for 2 months. Art isn't measured in time invested, but truth expressed." He set down his knife, turning to face her fully. "You've spent decades helping clients express themselves through their living spaces. Now you're expressing yourself directly without intermediaries. That's powerful." His faith in her abilities, his encouragement without pressure, these were gifts Amira had rarely experienced in her adult life. That night, in the gentle aftermath of lovemaking, she rested her head on his chest and whispered, "I'll contact the gallery." 2 days later, her instructor made the introduction to Galerie Petit Pont, a charming space specializing in contemporary landscapes. The owner, Madame Rousseau, requested digital images of Amira's work. To her astonishment, the gallery responded with interest in featuring 3 pieces in an upcoming exhibition of American artists in Paris. "It's really happening," Amira told Thomas during their weekly call, her voice breathless with excitement. "My paintings will hang in a Paris gallery. Can you believe it?" "I absolutely can," Thomas replied. "You've always been the most creative person I know. The rest of the world is finally catching up. As the exhibition date approached, coinciding with her final weeks in Paris, Amira received an unexpected email from Layla. "I heard about your gallery show from Thomas. That's amazing, Mom. I always knew you were talented. I wish I could be there." The message carried no mention of their estrangement, no acknowledgement of the wedding exclusion that had started their rupture. Yet it represented the first time in years that Layla had expressed genuine interest in her mother's life and achievements. Amira crafted a careful response. "Thank you for your kind words. It's been a journey of rediscovery here. How are you doing? Thomas mentioned you've moved permanently to Zara's." Layla's reply came surprisingly quickly. "Yes, I'm staying with her while figuring things out. Filed for legal separation last week. Nathan isn't taking it well. Sometimes I wonder if I made a mistake marrying him. I should have listened to you when you expressed concerns last year." The admission, however oblique, that Amira's judgment had been sound represented a significant shift. Mother and daughter began exchanging more regular emails, carefully navigating around the wedding-sized elephant in the room while rebuilding tentative connection. In late June, with just 2 weeks remaining in Paris, Amira received a lengthy email from Layla that finally addressed their core conflict. "I've been thinking about why I didn't invite you to the wedding. The truth is, Nathan convinced me you would try to control everything, that you'd make it about you instead of us. He said excluding you would help establish boundaries. I believed him because it was easier than standing up to him. I was wrong and I hurt you deeply. I'm sorry, Mom. Truly sorry." The apology so long awaited arrived when Amira no longer needed it to heal. Her time in Paris, rediscovering her passion for painting, building a relationship with Daniel, establishing a life centered on her own desires, had already mended what Layla's rejection had broken. The apology didn't complete her healing. It simply acknowledged the wound that had catalyzed her transformation. Amira showed the email to Daniel as they sat on a bench in Luxembourg Gardens, watching children sail miniature boats across the fountain pond. He read it carefully before returning her phone. "Will you accept her apology?" "I already have in my heart," Amira replied, watching a little girl in a red dress laugh as her boat caught the breeze. "But accepting doesn't mean returning to our old patterns. We need a new relationship, one with healthy boundaries and mutual respect." "That's wisdom." Daniel said, his arms settling comfortably around her shoulders. "Forgiveness without erasure of lessons learned." The gallery opening arrived on a perfect Parisian evening, the light golden and lingering as visitors filled the small space. Amira's 3 paintings, sane landscapes capturing different qualities of light, hung prominently on the main wall. Daniel stood proudly beside her, champagne flute in hand, as Madame Rousseau introduced her to collectors and fellow artists. "They're exquisite," a white-haired woman told her in accented English, lingering before the largest canvas. "You capture both place and emotion. Très difficile." By evening's end, 2 of her paintings displayed small red dots indicating sales. Amira floated through the remainder of the reception in disbelieving joy. Her work, created purely for personal expression, had connected with strangers enough that they wished to live with it in their homes. Walking home along the Seine, Daniel pulled her close. "How does it feel to be a successful Paris artist?" "Surreal," she admitted, watching the river catch last light in rippling gold patterns. "Like I'm living someone else's wonderful life." "It's yours," he reminded her, kissing her temple. "All yours? You claimed it." With only 10 days remaining before her return flight, Amira received another unexpected email from Layla. "Mom, I know this is last minute, but would it be okay if I came to Paris? I need to get away from everything here, and I'd really like to see you. I understand if the timing doesn't work." The request stunned Amira. After months of separation and cautious digital reconnection, the prospect of seeing Layla in person, in Paris on Amira's terms, seemed both promising and precarious. She discussed it with Daniel over dinner, weighing the potential benefits and complications. "It could be good," he suggested. "Meeting on neutral territory without the weight of shared spaces and routines. And she's making the effort to come to you rather than expecting you to abandon your plans and return. But what if it goes badly? What if seeing each other reopens wounds we've been trying to heal from a distance?" "Then you'll know you tried," Daniel said simply. "And you'll both have the Atlantic Ocean to help process afterward." After careful consideration, Amira responded to her daughter. "I would like that very much. My apartment has a sofa bed and I'm here until July 7th. Let me know what dates work for you." As she pressed send, Amira realized how much had changed. 6 months ago, she would have rearranged her entire life to accommodate Layla's request. Now she offered welcome without sacrificing her own plans or needs. The shift wasn't selfishness, but self-respect. the lesson Paris had taught her most profoundly. Layla booked a flight arriving 3 days later, planning a 5-day visit before Amira's scheduled departure. As the date approached, Amira experienced waves of anxiety alternating with hope. Would they connect as the mother and daughter they once were, or as the women they had become? Could they build something new from the ashes of expectations and disappointments? Daniel offered to make himself scarce during Layla's visit, but Amira declined. "You're part of my life now," she told him. "I want Layla to see me as I am today, not as the mother who existed solely for her." The evening before Layla's arrival, Amira stood on her small balcony watching Paris prepare for night. Street lamps flickered to life, cafes adjusted their awnings, couples strolled hand in hand along the narrow streets. Whatever happened with Layla's visit, this city had given Amira an invaluable gift. Herself reclaimed from the shadows of self-sacrifice and rediscovered in the light of self-determination. She thought of the painting that had sold at her gallery show, a view of the Seine at dawn, the river catching first light while the city still slumbered in purple shadows. The collector who purchased it had told her, "I feel possibility in this. The day could become anything from this beginning." Possibility. That's what awaited her now, with Layla's imminent visit, with Daniel's place in her life, with her rediscovered artistic voice. Not certainty, not perfection, but the open canvas of possibility. Her phone chimed with a text from Layla. "Boarding my flight now. See you tomorrow." Nervous but excited. Amira smiled, typing back, "Safe travels. Looking forward to showing you Paris. New beginnings are always worth the journey." Charles de Gaulle Airport buzzed with morning efficiency as Amira waited in the arrivals area, scanning each emerging passenger for her daughter's familiar face. Despite the overnight flight, Layla appeared remarkably composed when she finally emerged, pulling a single carry-on suitcase. The careful application of makeup couldn't fully conceal the shadows beneath her eyes, or the weight she'd lost since Amira last saw her. They hesitated, suspended in that strange moment between estrangement and reunion, before Layla stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her mother. "Hi, Mom," she whispered, her voice muffled against Amira's shoulder. The taxi ride to Montmartre unfolded in careful conversation, observations about the flight, comments on Parisian architecture, questions about Amira's apartment. They navigated around the deeper waters of their conflict, neither ready to plunge beneath the surface just yet. Layla's eyes widened as they entered Amira's apartment, taking in the easel by the window, the half-finished canvases stacked against the wall, the scattered brushes and paints. "This is really you now," she observed, trailing her fingers along the edge of a painting. Not a question, but a recognition of transformation. "Part of me was always this," Amira replied, watching her daughter absorb the evidence of her creative rebirth. "I just forgot for a while." They spent the first day as tourists. Notre Dame's reconstruction site, Luxembourg Gardens, a boat tour on the Seine. The structured activity provided necessary scaffolding for their tentative reconnection, allowing conversation to flow around external observations rather than internal wounds. Exhaustion from travel and emotional tension caught up with Layla by early evening. As she prepared the sofa bed, Amira noticed her daughter's phone constantly lighting up with notifications that Layla deliberately ignored. "Nathan?" Amira asked, nodding toward the buzzing phone. Layla's shoulders tensed. "He found out I was coming here. Hasn't stopped texting since. Are you worried?" "No. Yes. I don't know." Layla set the phone face down. "He can't control me from 4,000 miles away, right?" The question carried more vulnerability than anything else she'd said all day. Amira resisted the reflexive urge to offer solutions or protections. Instead, she asked, "What would make you feel safer right now?" "Just this," Layla replied after a moment. "Being somewhere he's never been, with someone who knew me before him." Amira slept fitfully that night, hyper-aware of her daughter's presence just beyond the bedroom door. Years of maternal vigilance couldn't be dismantled in a few months, despite her commitment to boundaries and self-care. She rose early, preparing coffee and croissants from the boulangerie downstairs before Layla stirred. The second day brought rain, confining them to the apartment until afternoon. They circled each other with increasing awareness that pleasantries and sightseeing couldn't indefinitely postpone the conversation they needed to have. The breaking point came unexpectedly as Layla examined a small watercolor of the Seine that Amira had painted during her first week in Paris. "You've gotten so good at this," she observed, something wistful in her tone. "I remember you used to sketch when I was really little before." She trailed off the unfinished sentence hanging between them. "Before your father left. Before I had to work 2 jobs. Before life got in the way." Amira completed the thought without bitterness, simply acknowledging the reality that had shaped them both. Layla set down the painting carefully. I never thanked you for that, did I, for all the sacrifices? I just took them as my due. The acknowledgement so long awaited broke something open between them. Layla's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry about the wedding, Mom. I can't believe I did that to you. Rather than rushing to comfort her daughter as she would have in the past, Amira allowed the moment to exist in its necessary discomfort. Why did you, Layla? I've been trying to understand. They moved to the small kitchen table, rain pattering against the windows as Layla gathered her thoughts. It started with small things. Nathan would make comments about how you called too often, how you had opinions about everything. He'd say, don't you want us to have our own life, not just be an extension of your mother's? The familiar manipulation tactic made Amira's stomach clench, but she kept her expression neutral, giving Layla space to continue. Then the wedding planning began and you were so excited, had so many ideas. Nathan said you were taking over, making it about you instead of us. Layla's fingers twisted together nervously. He started asking, wouldn't it be simpler without all that input, without all that drama? Drama, Amira echoed the word that had cut so deeply in Layla's dismissive text months ago. His favorite word for anything that challenged him. A flash of bitter recognition crossed Layla's face. By the time we set the date, he had me convinced that inviting you would somehow ruin everything, that you'd make scenes, criticize his family, overshadow me. And you believed that? The question emerged without judgment, simply seeking understanding. I wanted to believe I was making my own decision, establishing healthy boundaries. Layla's laugh held no humor. That's what he called it. Healthy boundaries. Now I realize he was isolating me from the person most likely to see through him. The rain intensified outside a rhythmic backdrop to their unfolding reconciliation. Amira reached across the table, covering her daughter's twisting fingers with her own. When did you start to realize what was happening? After you sold the house. Layla met her mother's gaze directly for the first time. He was so angry, but not in the way you'd expect. Not how could she do this to you, but how dare she do this to me? That's when I started noticing the pattern. Everything was about him, his image, his needs. The conversation flowed more freely, then Layla describing Nathan's escalating control after their return from the honeymoon. The jokes about her spending that became serious arguments. The gradual isolation from friends who asked uncomfortable questions. The discovery of credit card statements revealing gambling debts and lavish personal purchases. When you stopped answering my calls after selling the house, something changed. Layla's expression shifted to one of reluctant admiration. You'd always been there no matter what. Suddenly you weren't, and it made me look at what I'd done, what I'd allowed. I wasn't trying to teach you a lesson by going silent, Amira admitted. I was just trying to protect myself. I know, and that's what finally got through to me, seeing you choose yourself. Layla's eyes, so like Amira's own, held a new understanding. You showed me it was possible to walk away from people who don't value you, even when you love them. The dam broken, they talked through the afternoon as rain washed the Parisian streets below. They spoke of expectations and disappointments, of patterns established in Layla's childhood that had shaped her adult relationships, of Amira's struggle to find identity beyond motherhood. When evening arrived, bringing a break in the weather and rumbling stomachs, they ventured out to a nearby bistro. Over steaming plates of coq au vin, their conversation shifted to the future. What happens when we go back to Virginia? Layla asked the question, touching their most immediate uncertainty. I'm not sure, Amira replied honestly. We can't just return to how things were before. That dynamic wasn't healthy for either of us. I want to do better, Layla said, vulnerability softening her features. I want a relationship where we're both whole people, not just mother and daughter. That's what I want too. Amira smiled, recognizing the echo of her own recent journey in her daughter's words. It will take time and probably some missteps, but we can build something new. The third day of Layla's visit brought sunshine and an important introduction. Daniel arrived at Amira's apartment for lunch, carrying flowers and displaying none of the awkwardness that might have accompanied meeting his girlfriend's daughter under such complex circumstances. Amira observed their interaction with cautious optimism. Layla, initially reserved, gradually relaxed as Daniel engaged her in conversation about her marketing career, asking thoughtful questions without prying into her personal difficulties. By the time they left for an afternoon at Musée d'Orsay, a tentative ease had developed between them. Walking through the museum, Amira hung back slightly, watching Daniel explain the significance of particular paintings to Layla. Her daughter listened attentively, asking questions that revealed genuine interest rather than polite obligation. The sight of the two most important people in her current life, finding connection independent of her, filled Amira with unexpected joy. That evening, after Daniel departed with plans to join them again the following day, Layla broached the subject directly. "He's really great, Mom. I've never seen you with someone who looks at you the way he does." "What way is that?" Amira asked, curious about her daughter's perception. "Like he actually sees you, not as someone's mother or someone's wife or someone to take care of things, but just you." Layla's observation cut straight to the heart of what made her relationship with Daniel so different from any Amira had experienced before. "Are you going to try to make it work when you go back home?" "We're planning to," Amira acknowledged the prospect, both thrilling and terrifying when spoken aloud. "Massachusetts to Virginia isn't exactly convenient, but it's not impossible." "I'm happy for you," Layla said, and the simple sincerity of the statement marked another shift in their evolving relationship. Her daughter recognizing and supporting Amira's personal happiness, rather than viewing it through the lens of its impact on herself. The remaining days of Layla's visit unfolded with increasing ease. They explored Paris together, sometimes joined by Daniel, sometimes just the two of them, rediscovering how to exist in each other's company without the weight of unmet expectations. On Layla's final evening, Amira arranged a special dinner at a small restaurant overlooking the Seine, where the three of them toasted new beginnings with champagne as Paris glittered around them. "I've been thinking," Layla said as dessert arrived. "I'm not sure I want to stay in Virginia when all this with Nathan is finally settled. There's too much history there, too many mutual friends taking sides." "Where would you go?" Amira asked, noting the spark of independence in her daughter's eyes, a reflection of her own recent courage. "I don't know yet. Maybe Boston." Layla glanced meaningfully at Daniel, then back to her mother. "It has a good marketing industry, and I wouldn't be too far from certain people who might be spending time there." The suggestion that Layla might relocate to be near where Amira would presumably visit Daniel frequently represented such a reversal of their previous dynamic that Amira found herself momentarily speechless. Daniel smoothly filled the silence. "Boston's a wonderful city. Great culture, excellent restaurants. I could introduce you to some people in the marketing departments at several universities if you decided to explore opportunities there." Later, walking back to the apartment under a canopy of stars, Layla linked her arm through Amira's. "Thank you for letting me come to Paris. I know it couldn't have been easy after everything." "I'm glad you did," Amira replied, meaning it completely. "We needed this neutral ground to find our way back to each other." "Not back," Layla corrected gently. "Forward. To something new and better." The next morning brought goodbye at the airport, both women emotional but restrained. "I'll see you in Virginia next week," Amira reminded her daughter as they embraced. "We can continue this then." "I'd like that," Layla replied. "And Mom, I'm really proud of the woman you've become in Paris. I hope you bring her home with you." After Layla disappeared through security, Amira stood motionless in the departures hall, absorbing the profound role reversal in her daughter's parting words. For the first time in their relationship, Layla had acknowledged Amira's personhood separate from her maternal identity, not just intellectually but emotionally, with genuine admiration. The final days in Paris passed in a bittersweet blur. Amira finished her painting class, receiving heartfelt encouragement from her instructor to continue developing her talent back in America. She visited her favorite museums one last time, saying silent goodbyes to artworks that had become like friends. Daniel remained a constant presence, helping her pack the paintings she would take home, accompanying her on farewell walks through beloved neighborhoods. They spoke candidly about the challenges awaiting their relationship, the distance their established independent lives, the complexity of Amira's ongoing family situation. "I'm not afraid of complexity," Daniel told her as they shared a last dinner at their favorite bistro. "I'm afraid of regret, of not trying something that could be extraordinary because it isn't convenient or simple." On her final morning, Amira stood on her small balcony one last time, imprinting the view on her memory. Paris had given her more than beautiful experiences. It had returned her to herself. Whatever challenges awaited in Virginia, she would face them as this reclaimed woman, not the self-effacing mother she'd been before. The flight home stretched long, offering hours for reflection. Amira journaled, capturing her thoughts on this transformative chapter and her hopes for what lay ahead. She sketched fellow passengers to pass time, noting how much more confident her strokes had become since her tentative early days in Paris. Virginia greeted her with oppressive July heat and humidity, a stark contrast to Paris's more temperate summer. Thomas waited at baggage claim, his familiar presence grounding after the emotional whirlwind of recent weeks. "Welcome back, world traveler," he called, embracing her warmly. Or should I say, celebrated Parisian artist. See, home looked different through her transformed eyes. Her house, once her pride and sanctuary, now seemed cluttered with memorabilia from Layla's childhood, shrine-like in its preservation of the past. The first evening back, Amira wandered from room to room, mentally redesigning spaces to reflect who she had become rather than who she had been. Jet lag woke her before dawn. Rather than fighting it, she set up her easel on the back deck and painted the sunrise over her garden, the first Virginia landscape rendered through her newly developed artistic vision. As light spilled across familiar terrain, she recognized the same scene could be utterly transformed depending on how one chose to see it. Thomas visited that afternoon, bringing welcome home takeout and eager questions about Paris. They sat in Amira's living room, sharing wine as she recounted gallery showings and painting classes. "You look different," Thomas observed, studying her with the frank assessment only decades of friendship permitted. "It's not just the clothes or the haircut. There's something in your eyes, a certainty that wasn't there before." "Paris taught me to trust my own vision," Amira replied, understanding his observation went beyond the physical. "Not just in painting, but in life." "And Layla?" he asked carefully. "How was that reunion?" "Healing," she said after consideration. "Not perfect, not finished, but genuinely healing. We're meeting for lunch tomorrow to continue the conversation." The restaurant Layla selected for their first Virginia meeting was neutral territory, not a place loaded with family memories or associations with Nathan. Her daughter arrived precisely on time, dressed professionally as if coming from work, though Amira knew she was still on leave from her marketing position. "I filed the divorce papers yesterday," Layla announced after they'd ordered the words emerging with determined finality. Nathan contested, of course. His lawyer reached out with settlement offers that basically amount to him keeping everything. "What will you do?" Amira asked, consciously resisting the impulse to suggest solutions or take control. "Fight," Layla replied with unexpected firmness. "I've documented the financial deception, the emotional abuse patterns. My lawyer says we have a strong case. That takes courage." Amira acknowledged, recognizing the strength required to stand against Nathan's manipulations after months of gradual conditioning. "I learned it from watching you." Layla's admission carried weight beyond the simple words. "When you sold the house instead of letting us erase you, when you went to Paris instead of staying to fight, you showed me what real strength looks like." Their lunch stretched to nearly 3 hours, an expansive conversation covering practical matters and emotional terrain. Layla described her ongoing therapy, her tentative plans to restart her career, her growing certainty that leaving Nathan was necessary for her well-being. "I've been staying with Zara, but I need my own place," she concluded. "Something small but mine where I can figure out who I am when I'm not trying to please someone else." "I understand that need completely," Amira replied, remembering her own awakening in Paris. "Whatever support you need, practical or emotional, I'm here. But I'm not going to try to solve everything for you." "Good," Layla said with surprising firmness. "I need to do this myself. With help sometimes, but not with rescue." In the weeks that followed, Amira established new patterns for her Virginia life. She converted the formal dining room she rarely used into a painting studio, filling the space with natural light and the scents of oils and turpentine. She reconnected with design clients, accepting only projects that genuinely interested her, rather than taking everything offered. Most significantly, she began establishing clearer boundaries in her relationship with Layla. They spoke regularly, but not daily. They shared meals once or twice a week, rather than reflexively including each other in every plan. When Layla faced setbacks in her divorce proceedings, Amira offered emotional support without assuming responsibility for fixing the situation. "It's strange," Layla admitted during dinner at Amira's house one evening 6 weeks after their Paris reunion. "I actually feel closer to you now that we're not in each other's pockets all the time." "Boundaries create space for real connection," Amira replied, understanding exactly what her daughter meant. "When we're not suffocating each other with expectations, we can see each other more clearly." Daniel visited Virginia in mid-August, staying with Amira for a long weekend that included meeting her friends, exploring her favorite local spots, and a somewhat tense but ultimately successful dinner with Layla. As his return to teaching duties approached, they finalized plans for Amira to visit Massachusetts in October. "I'm thinking about getting a small studio apartment in Boston," Amira confessed as they walked through a local sculpture garden. "Not to live there full-time, but as a base for frequent visits, maybe a place to paint during the New England fall." "I'd like that very much," Daniel replied, squeezing her hand. "Though I warn you, my faculty housing is considerably less charming than your Montmartre apartment was." As summer transitioned to fall, Amira received an unexpected opportunity. A gallery owner from Washington, D.C., having seen her work in the Paris exhibition, reached out about including several pieces in an upcoming show featuring emerging artists of exceptional maturity, a diplomatic phrase for talented creators who had found their voice later in life. Simultaneously, a former design client contacted her about a significant project, renovating a historic building in Richmond into luxury condominiums. The developer wanted an interior designer with both traditional training and artistic sensibility, someone who could honor the building's heritage while creating contemporary living spaces. The convergence of these opportunities, one in her established field, one in her rediscovered passion, presented a crossroads. Before Paris, Amira would have automatically chosen the safer, more practical design contract. Now she found herself considering how to balance both, refusing to sacrifice either aspect of her creative identity. After careful consideration, she proposed a part-time consulting role on the Richmond project, allowing her to maintain her artistic practice while contributing her design expertise. To her surprise, the developer agreed, valuing her perspective enough to accommodate her terms rather than seeking another designer. "You've changed the way you move through the world," Thomas observed as they celebrated her dual successes over dinner. "You used to fit yourself into other people's expectations. Now you shape circumstances to honor your own needs." "I had a good teacher," Amira replied, thinking of Paris streets and museum halls, of Daniel's patient encouragement of her own reflection in Seine waters. Actually, many good teachers. October brought crisp air and Amira's first visit to Daniel's world in Massachusetts. His faculty apartment near campus was indeed modest compared to her Paris accommodation, but filled with books, art, and warmth that immediately made her feel welcome. She explored his daily routines: morning coffee at a campus cafe, afternoon office hours, where students sought his guidance, evening walks through tree-lined neighborhoods where colonial architecture whispered of history. She attended one of his lectures, watching with quiet pride as he engaged students with the same thoughtful attention he'd shown her when explaining Impressionist techniques in Parisian museums. Between Daniel's teaching responsibilities, they explored Boston, including neighborhoods Layla might consider if she proceeded with her tentative relocation plans. Amira found herself appreciating New England's distinctive character, so different from Virginia's languid grace, yet offering its own particular beauty in coastal vistas and historic streets. The visit confirmed what Paris had suggested. Their connection translated beyond the romantic backdrop of France into the practical reality of American life. They functioned well in each other's spaces, respecting individual routines while creating new shared patterns. On her final evening before returning to Virginia, they discussed the future with the straightforward honesty that characterized their relationship. "I've been offered a sabbatical extension through spring semester," Daniel told her as they prepared dinner together in his kitchen. "It would mean another 6 months of flexibility before I'd need to return to full-time teaching." "Where would you spend it?" Amira asked, the possibilities already unfurling in her mind. "Ideally dividing time between finishing my book and being wherever you are." His suggestion carried no pressure, simply an expression of desire. "I could write just as easily in Virginia as Massachusetts, at least for a while." The prospect of sustained time together, building their relationship without constant separations, filled Amira with both excitement and trepidation. What about next summer and beyond? We'd still face the same geographic challenge eventually. "True," Daniel acknowledged, stirring the pasta sauce with thoughtful movements. "But by then we'd know better if this is worth restructuring our lives for. And restructuring doesn't necessarily mean abandoning what matters to either of us." Their conversation continued late into the night, exploring options with the realistic perspective of people who had lived long enough to understand both compromise and conviction. No decisions were finalized, but possibilities emerged. Perhaps a dual location life, perhaps eventual relocation for one of them. Perhaps creative alternatives they hadn't yet imagined. Returning to Virginia, Amira carried these possibilities lightly, recognizing that their relationship had room to evolve without forcing premature conclusions. She immersed herself in preparations for the D.C. Gallery exhibition, creating several new paintings specifically for the show. Meanwhile, Layla's divorce proceedings intensified. Nathan, realizing his manipulation tactics weren't working, switched to financial intimidation, using his family's resources to draw out legal proceedings in hopes of exhausting Layla's more limited funds. "He's trying to break me," Layla confided during a Sunday brunch at Amira's house. "His lawyer calls mine almost daily with settlement offers that get worse each time, then threatens extended litigation if I don't accept. What does your lawyer advise? Amira asked, consciously maintaining her supportive but not controlling stance. To hold firm. We have documentation of his financial deception, the hidden gambling debts, everything. Layla pushed her eggs around her plate, appetite diminished by stress. But documentation doesn't matter if I can't afford to keep fighting. Amira considered carefully before responding. In the past, she would have immediately offered financial support, seeing her role as protector and problem solver. Now she recognized the importance of Layla finding her own strength. I won't tell you what to do, she said finally. But I will tell you that I believe in your judgment, and I trust you to make the right decision for your well-being. If resources are what you need to follow through on that decision, we can discuss options. The careful wording, offering support without assumption, acknowledging Layla's agency while providing backup, represented their new dynamic in practice. Layla noticed the difference, her expression shifting from frustration to thoughtful consideration. Thank you, she said simply. I need to think about what victory really looks like here. Maybe fighting to the bitter end isn't actually the win I'm imagining. 2 days later, Layla called with news. I'm offering Nathan a settlement. Not the one he wants, but one that lets me walk away with enough to restart somewhere new. My lawyer thinks he'll take it just to be done. How do you feel about that decision? Amira asked, focusing on her daughter's emotional state rather than the practical details. Peaceful, actually. Like I'm choosing freedom over punishment. Layla's voice carried the calm certainty of someone who had thoroughly examined their options. And I've decided. If he accepts, I'm definitely moving to Boston. I've already applied for positions at 3 marketing firms there. The settlement came through a week later. Nathan, perhaps recognizing the potential embarrassment of having his financial and emotional manipulations aired in court, accepted terms that provided Layla with sufficient resources to relocate and rebuild. The divorce wouldn't be final for several months due to Virginia's waiting period requirements, but the financial and property matters were resolved. As November arrived, bringing the D.C. gallery opening and increasing certainty about Layla's move to Boston, Amira found herself contemplating her own next steps. The part-time consulting arrangement with the Richmond developer functioned smoothly, providing both income and creative satisfaction without consuming all her energy. Daniel had confirmed his sabbatical extension and proposed spending January through March primarily in Virginia, with Amira visiting Massachusetts during April and May. This arrangement would give them sustained time together while maintaining connections to their respective bases. One crisp afternoon, as Amira sorted through old photographs for a project Layla had suggested, digitizing family images from before the digital era, she discovered a sketchbook from her college years. Flipping through pages of youthful drawings, she recognized the seeds of her current artistic voice, visible even in those early attempts. The discovery prompted reflection on life's circular nature. She had begun as an artist, detoured through decades of practical concerns and maternal dedication, and returned to art with the wisdom those years had provided. Not a straight line of progress, but a spiral returning to origin points with deeper understanding. When Layla arrived that evening to help with the photo project, Amira shared the sketchbook and her reflections. They sat together on the living room floor, surrounded by photo albums and memories, engaged in conversation that moved fluidly between past and future. I remember this day, Layla said, holding up a photograph of herself at about 7, proudly displaying a science project. You stayed up all night helping me fix it after I knocked it over. You were so worried about disappointing your teacher. Amira recalled the memory bittersweet. I would have done anything to protect you from that feeling. You always tried to protect me from everything, Layla observed without accusation. I never had to learn how to fail until I was too old to do it gracefully. The insight, Layla recognizing how their dynamics had shaped her development for better and worse, marked another step in their evolving relationship. They continued sorting photos, their conversation weaving between lighthearted reminiscence and more profound observations about patterns they both hoped to change. As Layla prepared to leave, she hesitated at the door. I have an appointment to look at apartments in Boston next weekend. Would you want to come with me? Not to choose for me, she added quickly, just to see the city together. Maybe meet Daniel for dinner while we're there. The invitation, Layla proactively including Amira in her plans while explicitly acknowledging boundaries, represented everything they'd been working toward since Paris. I'd love that, Amira replied, recognizing the milestone the moment represented. The following week brought the D.C. gallery opening, a sophisticated affair attracting collectors and art enthusiasts from across the eastern seaboard. Amira invited both Thomas and Layla to accompany her, wanting to share this achievement with the people who had witnessed her transformation. Standing before her displayed works, 3 Virginia landscapes rendered with techniques perfected in Paris, Amira experienced a profound sense of integration. The separate pieces of herself, artist, designer, mother, partner, no longer competed for primacy, but existed in harmonious relationship, each enriching the others. The gallery owner introduced her to several interested collectors, one of whom purchased 2 paintings before the evening ended. As congratulations flowed, Amira caught sight of Layla across the room, speaking animatedly with a young gallery assistant. Her daughter looked up, met her eyes, and raised her champagne glass in a silent toast of acknowledgement and pride. Later that night, as they drove back to Virginia, Layla broke the comfortable silence. "I've been thinking about what happens after Boston, after the divorce is final and I'm settled." "What do you mean?" Amira asked, glancing briefly from the highway to her daughter's contemplative profile. "I think I want to try therapy. Not just crisis management like I'm doing now, but deeper work." Layla's voice carried determination beneath its vulnerability. "I keep repeating patterns from relationship to relationship. I want to understand why so I don't make the same mistakes again." "That takes courage," Amira acknowledged, recognizing her daughter's readiness to examine herself with the same honesty Amira had discovered in Paris. "I'm learning it from you," Layla replied simply. Their weekend in Boston unfolded with a new ease between them. They viewed apartments together, with Amira offering opinions when asked, but primarily supporting Layla's independent decision-making process. They met Daniel for dinner, the 3 of them discussing neighborhoods and opportunities with the comfortable dynamic of people building chosen family connections. On their final evening, walking along the Charles River, as sunset painted the water copper and gold, Layla broached a subject they'd carefully avoided since Paris. "I've never properly apologized for the wedding," she said, stopping to face her mother directly. "Not just for excluding you, but for letting Nathan convince me that was acceptable. I need you to know how deeply I regret hurting you that way." The apology, delivered not in emotional crisis but in calm reflection, carried weight that previous acknowledgments had lacked. Amira recognized it as an important step in their healing, not because she still needed the apology, but because Layla needed to offer it from this more mature place. "Thank you," she said simply. "I accept your apology, and I want you to know that while the hurt was real, it also catalyzed changes that needed to happen. Sometimes pain serves a purpose we can't recognize until later." They continued walking, the conversation shifting to lighter topics, but Amira sensed something fundamental had settled between them. Not erasing the past, but incorporating it into a healthier present. December arrived with holiday preparations and increasing excitement about Daniel's upcoming extended stay. Amira reorganized her home to create space for his presence, clearing half the closet in her bedroom, emptying a desk in the guest room for his writing needs, making room on bookshelves for volumes he couldn't bear to leave behind. These practical adjustments mirrored the emotional space she'd created in her life, not surrendering her identity or independence, but intentionally making room for partnership without diminishment. Layla signed a lease on a Boston apartment with a January move-in date, perfectly timed to coincide with Daniel's arrival in Virginia. The synchronicity felt meaningful, both of them beginning new chapters simultaneously. "It's strange to think we'll be swapping places," Layla remarked during their final dinner before Christmas. "Him coming here as I'm going there. Life has its own choreography sometimes," Amira replied, appreciating the elegant timing that would allow her to help Layla settle in Boston before returning to welcome Daniel to Virginia. Christmas Eve brought an unexpected development. Thomas, arriving for their traditional holiday gathering, brought news that the local community college was seeking an art instructor for their continuing education program. "It's just evening classes for adults," he explained as they prepared dinner together. "Mostly hobbyists and retirees looking to explore their creativity. The previous teacher moved to Florida, and they need someone to start in February." "I'm not qualified to teach," Amira protested, though the idea immediately intrigued her. "I've only been painting seriously for a year." "That's precisely why you'd be perfect," Thomas countered. "You understand the journey from beginner to committed artist because you've just traveled it yourself. Plus, you have decades of design expertise to draw from." The prospect of guiding others through creative discovery, sharing the joy and challenges she'd experienced in reclaiming her artistic voice, resonated deeply. Amira promised to consider the opportunity, recognizing how perfectly it might complement her existing design, consulting, and personal painting practice. Christmas Day passed quietly, just Amira, Layla, and Thomas sharing gifts and memories. The contrast with previous holidays, Elaborate affairs where Amira exhausted herself creating perfect experiences reflected their evolving relationships and priorities. As the year drew to a close, Amira spent an evening alone journaling reflections on the profound changes 12 months had brought. From the shock of discovering Layla's wedding through social media, to the transformation in Paris, from selling the house to building a new relationship with Daniel, from rebuilding connections with Layla to establishing her identity as an artist, the journey felt almost mythic in its scope. Yet she recognized that transformation rarely arrives at neat endpoints. The coming year would bring new challenges, maintaining her creative practice amid practical responsibilities, navigating long-distance relationship logistics with Daniel, establishing healthy patterns in her evolving relationship with Layla, balancing independence with partnership. But unlike previous years when she'd approached challenges with anxiety about getting everything right, Amira now faced uncertainty with quiet confidence. Paris had taught her that she possessed the capacity not just to endure change, but to shape it according to her own vision. New Year's Eve found her at a small gathering at Thomas's house, surrounded by longtime friends and looking forward to midnight. As conversations flowed around her, Amira stepped onto the back deck for a moment alone beneath the winter stars. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel, counting down to January 15th more than midnight. Can't wait to begin our next chapter. Seconds later, another message appeared, this one from Layla. Thinking of you tonight, Mom. Thank you for showing me how to begin again. Love you. The parallel messages arriving almost simultaneously from the two people representing her future and her past. Her chosen love and her lifelong bond struck Amira as perfectly symbolic of where she now stood. At the intersection of history and possibility of responsibility and freedom of giving and receiving. She texted brief but heartfelt responses to both, then slipped her phone back into her pocket and gazed upward at the vast Virginia sky. The woman who had dropped a knife in shock upon discovering her daughter's wedding less than a year ago now stood straighter, seeing clearer, breathing deeper. Thomas appeared in his doorway, champagne glasses in hand. Almost midnight, coming inside. In a moment, Amira replied, taking the offered glass but remaining on the deck. I'm just appreciating the view. When Thomas returned inside, Amira raised her glass to the stars in a private toast. To finding yourself when you thought you were lost. To loving others without losing yourself in the process. To the art of beginning again as many times as necessary. As midnight approached, she heard her friends counting down inside. The familiar ritual of endings and beginnings, of closing chapters and opening new ones, felt especially poignant this year. When cheers erupted at the stroke of 12, Amira smiled and whispered to herself, words that had become her personal truth. The sweetest revenge isn't hurting those who hurt you. It's learning to live beautifully without their approval. And the greatest love isn't sacrifice, but presence. Being fully yourself while making space for others to do the same. She took a final moment under the stars before rejoining the celebration, grateful for Paris, for pain that had pushed her toward growth, for a daughter finding her own path, for a partner who saw her completely, and most of all for the courage to claim her own life as her primary masterpiece.